There is nothing wrong with going to the doctor. It's not a poor reflection on you in any way. You know, we all cheer and admire professional athletes, especially football players. Well, all of these men receive regular and comprehensive medical exams. Also, even without health insurance, a routine physical costs between $100 and $350, with the average price being at $199. And lastly, as is too often the case, part of this responsibility is going to fall on the women who are in men's lives. And whether it's a mother, wife, sister, daughter, or just close friend, please check on your men and encourage them to go to the doctor. Let them know how special they are and that you want them to be around for a long time. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I believe to be a unique life experience. And you can read more about that in the profile or the bio. My intent is to share stories and experiences and hopefully provide some life and career lessons that will help you on your journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5 and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth. There's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some initial commentary on current news or just my thoughts. Then I'll go deeper on one topic, which will be today's truth. And then I like to finish with an American history fun fact. Okay, lots I want to cover today. But first, this is episode 40 of The Ruthless Truth, and I want to thank everyone who has ever listened to the podcast and helped reach this milestone. I appreciate every listener and every comment, even the critical ones. The Ruthless Truth has been accessed from over 300 U.S. cities and from 27 countries around the world. Interestingly, the top 5 countries after the U.S., in order, are Singapore, the UK, France, Hong Kong, and Finland. I can't explain these trends. I don't even have a theory. So I'll just appreciate the broad interest. But again, thank you so much for listening. Okay, the Super Bowl. Since I don't talk about sports on The Ruthless Truth, I will not comment on the game itself other than to congratulate the Seattle Seahawks on their win. But you know, the Super Bowl is more than a football game. It's an annual cultural event. I believe the Monday after Super Bowl should be a national holiday. And here's a little fun fact. It is by far the Monday after Super Bowl, by far the day of the year with the highest volume of workers calling in sick. All right, let's talk about halftime. Just as a quick reminder, when it was first announced that Bad Bunny would be the halftime performer, on day one, I said, that's a bad idea. But I understood. The NFL so badly wants to build an international fan base. Because while football is the overwhelmingly most popular sport in the United States, globally, it's not even in the top 10, greatly trailing the other North American sports global rankings of hockey at number 3, tennis 4, basketball at number 7, baseball is ranked 8th, and golf is ranked 10. Of course, soccer is number 1. Also, Bad Bunny is the most downloaded artist in the world with a huge international base. So from a number standpoint, it made sense. But as all of you now know, Bad Bunny only performs in Spanish. Apparently, many people were surprised by this on Sunday, but the NFL knew when they made the decision. At least I sure hope they knew. The key to a good halftime artist is that it's someone who's well known, with a large category of music, with many songs the audience recognizes and can sing along with. I remember the year Coldplay was announced as the halftime performer. Now, I love Coldplay, but my initial response was, they weren't well known enough. And the NFL must have eventually realized it as well, because a couple of weeks before the Super Bowl, they announced they were adding Beyonce to the halftime roster. Great move. And I kept expecting a similar announcement before this year's game, but it never came. So while the audience was huge, many U.S. fans didn't enjoy the performance because they weren't familiar with the songs and they didn't understand the lyrics. This should not have been a surprise to anyone. But I must admit, even I was surprised by how political this story became. I thought it would blow over, but many on the right kept fanning the flames to keep this story alive since the initial announcement. And the most ludicrous of arguments is, well, the halftime performer should be an American citizen. Really? Well, first, Bad Bunny is a native of Puerto Rico, making him a U.S. citizen. And here's a little fun fact for you. Bad Bunny is eligible to run for president of the United States. Melania Trump is not. Also, here's just a partial list of previous halftime performers who are not U.S. citizens. The Who, The Weeknd, The Stones, Paul McCartney, Coldplay, Rihanna, and Shakira. And by the way, Bad Bunny joined Shakira and J-Lo during their halftime performance in 2020. Not at all surprisingly, the president threw a social media tantrum over the performance, and the Turning Point alternative show did manage to draw a few million viewers. But as I've said before, this felt way overblown. I mean, we're talking about a 12-minute performance. But I guess it was a great vehicle for those who want to use the cultural wars to keep us divided. Okay, the second factor of the Super Bowl, outside of the game, are the commercials. Now, the premise of the Ruthless Truth is that I have had a unique life experience and I'm able to speak on many topics from a perspective that few others have. Well, that definitely applies here because I have produced and run a commercial on the Super Bowl. Now, before I get to the Super Bowl ads, let me first say this. I never wanted to advertise on the Super Bowl, but my boss wanted to run a Super Bowl ad to announce a new product launch, so I had to do it. And I'm often asked, well, why don't you want to advertise on the Super Bowl? Well, here's why. And first, putting aside the exorbitant expense, as this year a 30-second commercial cost $8 million, and that's not even counting the cost of producing the ad. No, my objection is because I'm a marketing purist. The only business purpose of advertising is to sell. Again, the purpose of advertising is to sell products or services. But that's not the purpose of Super Bowl advertising. Super Bowl advertising strives to be entertaining, funny, emotionally impactful, socially conscious, because that's what gets people to give the ads high marks. And all that's great. But does it sell? I can't tell you how many times I've had people say to me, oh man, I saw this really great commercial. It was so funny. And I'll just ask, really? Well, what product was it advertising? Oh, I don't remember that. Well, you know what? That's a bad ad. Of course, it's a constant battle with the creative teams, who make the ads, because it's a lot more fun to make entertaining ads. But I would always say, I prefer clarity over cleverness. But if you are going to make a popular Super Bowl ad, there are several tried and true approaches. Popular ads usually include one or more of the following elements: celebrities, cute animals, cute kids, sophomore humor, or special effects. Okay, with that, to this year's commercials. Before I share my thoughts, please recognize that rating Super Bowl commercials is highly subjective, primarily because there are no standard criteria. Some people are looking for memorable, while others are just looking for funny. And while advertising a product can be effective, sometimes it's often, it's kind of boring. Okay, that said, I thought this was a down year for the commercials. I mean, I know it's hard for you to recall specific ads, but let's look at a couple of prevailing themes from this year. By far, artificial intelligence, or AI, was the dominant trend, representing 16 of the 66 commercials that aired. Some were interesting, some were kind of creepy. But of that bunch, I thought the Google ad was great. It was cute, heartwarming, and most importantly, effectively demonstrated the product. I felt the same way about the Redfin ad, but many reviewers ranked it low. The Dunkin' ad was polarizing. I was lukewarm on it. Overall, there was heavy use of celebrities across many ads, but most of them missed the mark. Although I did like the Michelob Ultra ad with Kurt Russell. And finally, while many people liked the Pepsi ad, to me, it violated the sacred rule of advertising. Don't make the commercial about your competitor. Because once they inserted the polar bear, it was as much about Coke as it was about Pepsi. You know, Super Bowl ads come and go. However, given the heavy investment, you can expect to see these ads frequently over the next few months. We'll see if AI companies can ease Americans' fear and gain broader acceptance as the year progresses. Okay, besides the Super Bowl, the other hot topic from the weekend was the video posted on the president's social media site that included an animated depiction of President and Michelle Obama as apes. You know, describing black people as apes is a racist troll that dates back to the beginning of slavery. It was used then to characterize blacks as less than human, thus allowing the masses to accept the inhuman treatment and abuse suffered by the slave population. Okay, a couple thoughts on this. First, I was shocked and somewhat pleasantly surprised to see such immediate and bipartisan outrage from the post. Many Republican leaders publicly criticized the posting, calling for its removal and an apology from the White House. Even Tim Scott, who is always vying for the role of greatest Trump sycophant and long ago exchanged his self-respect for a marginal embrace by the president, he spoke out and called it, quote, the most racist thing I've seen from this White House. Quite the revealing statement, as it acknowledges there have been other racist acts from this White House. Okay, my second thought, now you have outrage? This is the act that was so offensive, Republicans feel compelled to speak out and reject? Look, there's no question it was offensive, but as I've said many times, nothing this president does ever surprises me. His elevator has no bottom floor. He can always go lower. But at least in this case, the only things that were hurt were people's feelings and sensibilities. In contrast, the actions of ICE and DHS are disrupting families and communities and killing citizens in broad daylight. Military action was recently threatened against Greenland because the president didn't win an award that he so desperately wants. Our reputation in the world is in tatters, but this internet meme is the act you want to push back on? Give me a break. Tell the Washington leaders to call me when they're ready to do their jobs and oppose the actions that are really hurting people and our nation. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. Okay, originally I was going to use the time today to discuss the trad wife versus feminism cultural war. I find it fascinating and somewhat perplexing. But I don't want to do it short shrift, and I have less time than usual for today's truth, so I'll address it at another time. You know, this conflict and debate isn't going anywhere anytime soon, so we can talk about it another time. So instead today's truth, I want to talk about men's health in general and black men's health in particular. And I want to go right at the main issue. Why don't men go to the doctor? You know, this came to mind after I reviewed a recent post from a prominent online influencer. And his post was quite simple. All he said in his post was, quote, "Just had my annual physical. Black men go to the doctor." That's it. That's all he said. Shared the thought, encouraged people going to the doctor. But the amount of negative and nasty comments he received was absolutely mind-blowing. Men were accusing him of being weak. Others listed all the reasons of why going to the doctor is a waste of time and money, stating, all you need to do is eat right and go to the gym, and there's no point to a doctor's visit. But by far, the worst of it was wrapped in homophobia. One comment was a sentiment shared by many. Now, I'll clean it up a bit for you here, but the response was basically, he got fingered and now trying to tell us to go. Ladies and gentlemen, I was stunned. Look, I of course know that toxic masculinity is a real thing, and many men live in dreaded fear of being seen or perceived to be anything less than a real man, which means tough, unemotional, and 100% heterosexual. But damn, we're not talking about going to a cabaret. We're talking about just routinely getting examined and tested to make sure you're not dying of anything. Because most of the major medical problems can be successfully treated if caught early. Let's take one that is specific to men, and even more so, black men. Prostate cancer. Do you know what the 5-year survival rate is for prostate cancer? It's 98%. 98%. And yet, prostate cancer is the second most deadly cancer for U.S. men, averaging 35,000 deaths per year. Only lung cancer is more deadly. And here is just a partial list of celebrities who have died from prostate cancer. Merv Griffin, O.J. Simpson, Dexter King, who's the son of Martin Luther King Jr., James Michael Tyler, known from Friends, Ryne Sandberg, Hall of Fame second baseman for the Cubs and one of my favorite players, Jerry Orbach, known for playing Lenny Briscoe on Law and Order, and there are many others. So how can this be? A cancer that is almost 100% curable still kills tens of thousands of men every year. Because it's only effectively treated if you catch it early, which means prostate screenings, and the most common screening is a DRE, which is or digital rectal exam. Apparently, for a lot of men, the thought of this is scarier than the prospect of death. I'll share one horrific example of this fear before moving on. In 2020, a Jacksonville man shot and killed his doctor after he had experienced an orgasm during a digital rectal exam. He apparently freaked out and panicked from the physical reaction because he perceived it as a homosexual encounter. Unbelievable. But beyond prostate cancer, many potentially debilitating and deadly diseases can be successfully treated with early detection, including diabetes, hypertension, COPD, and various cancers. So why don't men go to the doctor? Well, I already mentioned toxic masculinity, but here are some other leading reasons. Fear and embarrassment. Fear of receiving bad news and embarrassment of being sick. Another reason is just lack of habit. Going to the doctor is simply not routine for many men. A third reason is financial burden, including time and money. Many men don't have health insurance and they don't believe they can afford to pay out of pocket. Another one is avoidance of lifestyle changes. Many guys enjoy the way they currently live and they don't want someone telling them to make changes in diet or exercise or other unhealthy habits like smoking. So what can we do about it? Well, first, to my fellow men, please know, there is nothing wrong with going to the doctor. It's not a poor reflection on you in any way. We all cheer and admire professional athletes, especially football players. Well, all of these men receive regular and comprehensive medical exams. Also, even without health insurance, A routine physical costs between $100 and $350, with the average price being at $199. And lastly, as is too often the case, part of this responsibility is going to fall on the women who are in men's lives. And whether it's a mother, wife, sister, daughter, or just close friend, please check on your men and encourage them to go to the doctor. Let them know how special they are and that you want them to be around for a long time. Male life expectancy is a full 5 years shorter than for women. We can go a long way in closing this gap by making routine physical exams the norm for all men. Okay, let's get to today's American History Fun Fact. Today's American History Fun Fact. As part of my love for American history, I have a particularly high fascination with iconic national structures and monuments, including Hoover Dam, Mount Rushmore, the Golden Gate Bridge, and my all-time favorite, the Statue of Liberty. And even though I've visited the city nearly 200 times, I never cease to marvel at the monument. And while nearly all Americans are aware of the existence of the Statue of Liberty, I think few citizens really know the true origin of the statue. So in today's American History Fun Fact, I will share with you the true story behind the original idea for the Statue of Liberty and its eventual development. So if you poll most people about the statue's origin, they will say it was a gift from France to celebrate the young country's centennial and to welcome new immigrants to the United States. Okay, couple immediate problems with that premise. First, Lady Liberty is on Liberty Island, not Ellis Island. And second, and more importantly, the first Ellis Island immigrant station did not open until 1892, a full 6 years after the statue was erected in New York Harbor in 1886. So, it's unlikely the statue was connected to Ellis Island or immigration. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Edouard de La Boulaye was the French architect behind the Statue of Liberty, and he was an activist for the abolition of slavery. He was an expert on the U.S. Constitution, and at the close of the Civil War, he was the president of a committee that raised and dispersed funds to newly freed American slaves. And this is according to Yasmin Sabina Khan, author of the book Enlightening the World, The Creation of the Statue of Liberty. La Boulaye had hoped to create the Statue of Liberty for America, not only to praise the two countries for coming together, but also to show his gratitude toward President Abraham Lincoln's fight against slavery. The idea was originally conceived in 1865, the year the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, and proposed as a monument to commemorate the centennial of the United States in 1876. The statue was designed by French sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, and its metal framework was built by Gustave Eiffel. Yeah, that Eiffel. However, progress was delayed by the Franco-Prussian War. Additionally, the team struggled to raise funding to complete the project. In the original design, Lady Liberty's right hand was as we see it today, held high, holding a torch. But in her left hand, she was conceived to be holding broken shackles to symbolize the end of slavery. But in the final version, the shackles are replaced with a large tablet inscribed with the Roman numerals for July 4th, 1776, signifying American Independence Day. But the shackles weren't completely removed from the final monument. They can now be found at Lady Liberty's feet, under the drapery, but are hidden for most people to see. Bartholdi completed the head and the torch-bearing arm before the statue was fully designed. And then these pieces were exhibited for publicity at international expositions. The torch-bearing arm was displayed at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia in 1876, and then it was in the Madison Square Park in Manhattan from 1876 to 1882. But fundraising continued to be a challenge until publisher Joseph Pulitzer of the New York World started a drive for donations to finish the project. So Bartholdi finally finished building the statue in Paris in 1884. And then 2 years later, he oversaw its reconstruction in New York. So Liberty Enlightening the World was unveiled on October 28, 1886. A full 20 years, more than 20 years, after it was initially conceived. However, not everyone was excited about the arrival of the Statue of Liberty. By then, the original meaning of the abolition of slavery had pretty much gotten lost, going totally unmentioned in newspaper coverage. In fact, black newspapers railed against this statue as meaningless and hypocritical. Because by 1886, Reconstruction had been crushed, the Supreme Court had ruled back civil rights protections, and Jim Crow laws were tightening their grip. Additionally, during this time, women still didn't have the right to vote, and yet the statue portrays a woman as the face of America's political liberty. The notion of liberty for all left many communities feeling excluded and doubtful about the true meaning behind the statue. Still, after the dedication, the Statue of Liberty became an icon of freedom and of the United States, seen as a symbol of welcome to immigrants by sea. It's undergone many changes in management and then received a major restoration leading up to the country's bicentennial in 1976. But I still find it unfortunate that there is so little effort to promote the statue for its original intent and meaning. I guess it's just sexier to talk about welcoming immigrants than freeing slaves. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Thank you again so much for listening. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth. And there's also the Facebook page Ruthless Truth. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.